atheism is saying that the thoughts in our minds are in the end only the results of a mindless, unguided process. Now, if that is the case, it seems to me that it's very difficult to see how they could tell us anything that is true about ourselves. I think it was Steven Pinker who said, wasn't it, that evolution has to do with reproductive success and nothing to do with truth.
Well, Christians believe that because we live in a fallen world, we are all fallible human beings who can make all kinds of cognitive errors. If that's the case, how would such humans be any more capable of discerning truth than beings who evolved cognitive systems that facilitate survival and reproduction? Although such systems don't need to always discern the truth in order to be effective, I think it stands to reason that the ability to make accurate predictions about future experiences would convey a significant survival advantage. Since that's the case, it seems reasonable to infer that a cognitive system refined to produce beliefs that aid survival would be likely to at least occasionally produce beliefs which are true, because I don't see how false beliefs could more often be advantageous than true ones. But either way, regardless of whether our minds were created by a god or evolution, the fact that we can occasionally be mistaken casts doubt on all our beliefs. Even if there is a god, our ability to find and correctly identify the truth is suspect.
It's perfectly obvious that natural selection would favor, in any animal, a brain that behaves in a way that recognizes truth and acts upon it.
Well, I can't resist a little quip, but I notice many of my fellow human beings doing very well through telling lies.
That misses the point entirely. People can do well by telling lies, but they don't often do so well by believing in them.
Now, life, as we both know, has got this digital database. It's got a language all of its own. Now, the only thing we know of capable of producing language is mind.
Lennox's shtick is reifying the metaphor that biologists sometimes use when they describe DNA as a language or a code. He takes this literally because of a common misunderstanding that many apologists have about information. They think that information can't be created without a mind. This is horse shit. Information is simply any non-random pattern. If a rock falls into some mud and leaves an impression, the shape of that impression will not be random. It will contain information about the shape of the rock that created it. No mind is necessary for this. No mind is necessary for the process by which DNA is formed and affects the life forms containing it. There is no logical problem with the idea that life is every bit as mechanistic and mindless as the information created when a rock falls into some mud.
Here we have this phenomenally sophisticated information processor, which is the cell. Am I really to believe that that information processing capacity simply came about by the laws of nature and random processes without a mind?
Yes.
Well, I find that impossible to believe as a mathematician.
I know you do. This is called the argument from personal incredulity.
The complex and ordered processes of physics and chemistry created ordered and complex structures of DNA in the cell. Why is that so hard to believe? I really don't see how this idea is more difficult to imagine than the idea that a disembodied mind, capable of existing without time or space, created DNA.
But I could just reverse that and say your position is the argument from personal credulity.
No,
that rationality comes from irrationality, that mind comes from matter. To me, the biblical explanation in the beginning was the word, the logos. That makes perfect sense.
No, it fucking doesn't. What does it even mean to say that the word, whatever the fuck that is even supposed to mean, existed independent of the universe?
The fact that the basic description of this ancient language, and it's a very ancient language of DNA, points much more arguably to the existence of a logos, a divine logos who started it, than the notion that it's going to be exhaustively explained in purely naturalistic terms. Because I would still go back to the point I made earlier, although I don't want to harp on it. This extreme reductionism removes from me the very rationality which we use to have the discussion.
No, it fucking doesn't. Lennox is assuming that rationality itself is some metaphysical thing and cannot be a physical process. Rationality is an organized system of cognition. If cognition itself is the product of organized mechanistic processes, why is it so hard to believe that it would be capable of forming an organized system like logic? This is just another way of stating Frank Turek's stupid argument that if thought is nothing but brain activity, then you're not reasoning, you're just reacting. Turek says this as though reasoning itself cannot be a kind of reaction. I think this is based on the assumption that reasoning somehow requires free will. I don't think this is true. If I see a properly formed modus ponens argument, for example, and I believe its premises, I don't feel like I freely decide that the conclusion is true. It seems rather that the conclusion follows inescapably, and if I believe the premises, I don't feel free to simultaneously disbelieve the conclusion that necessarily logically follows from them.